This is the Rascal Town Goblin from Suggs, aka Rogue Hobbies, and I wanted to put it into a little bit of a diorama. And I didn't just want to do it with just that miniature. You can see in the picture there's a fish that it's obviously caught, and I thought, well, I wonder if there's another fish that's a little bit ticked off that its friend, whatever, has been caught by this goblin. And that kind of gave birth in my brain to this diorama. To begin with, I had to make another fish. I had to make a big fish, so I got to work sculpting it out of Sculpey. Now, I'm not a sculptor. This is my first time really ever trying to do something quite I want to say detailed, but it's more cartoony than detailed, to be fair. But this is the first time trying to do something actually proper, sculpting something proper. And it was a fun challenge. It was tricky. It wasn't something I was comfortable with. But I think a lot of this hobby is kind of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And really trying new things. Certainly that's what I'm trying to do on this channel, is just try and push myself. And I was really pleased actually with how it came out. I used a lot of wire on the inside just to give it a little bit of extra strength. Baked it in the oven, gave it a white primer, and got to work painting it. I didn't get loads of footage of me painting. I can't remember. I thought I filmed a lot more than this. But I think it must have got lost, or I just didn't press record or whatever. But you can see it once it's finished anyway, what it is. But it was a very basic paint job to try and give it a cartoony effect. When it came to the Rogue Hobbies Goblin, the Rascal Town Goblin, I wanted to put a little bit more detail into it. So there are all the paints that I used on this mini. And it was just a basic paint job, as I've done in some of the other videos, layering it up. I put all the base coats down, using the Two Thin Coats paints again. I absolutely love the Two Thin Coats. They just work so well for stuff like this. I've never really been a layer painter or a line edger or any, edge highlighter or anything like that really, but these paints do make it a lot easier. And so I use those a lot on this and tried to blend and glaze and all of the stuff that I don't normally do on a paint job. But I'm trying to learn to be a little bit better at, trying to learn to get a little bit more confidence in my own skills to do it. So I worked my way up through various different highlights and things like, just all across the various different colours. A lot of the highlight colours, I just mix the base colour with some white or some ivory. For the white fur, so it's kind of beard, and the white on the fish, I threw some Nuln Oil on it to give it the dark shadows. And then went back over it with the white star to just make it pop. And yeah, just picked it all out. It was a really fun model to paint. Lots of detail, but not too much detail. Lots of things to pick out here and there. I even tried some non-metallic metal for the gold to give it a nice cartoony effect. And overall, I'm really, really pleased with how it came out. A brilliant mini. Once it was painted, and I'd got the fish painted, so you can see there how that turned out, I set about with the actual diorama itself. I bought this wooden MDF circle probably about a year ago with something else completely in mind. But I thought it would work really well for this. So I measured out where I wanted the trail. The idea is the goblin's just coming out of the water and the fish is chasing him, angry, trying to get back the fish that he has caught, trying to rescue him. So I stuck it all together, got some XPS foam, glued all that down. Now I made the mistake, I glued this down with Mod Podge. And you can tell me in the comments if that was a terrible idea or not. I've used Mod Podge before. Normally I would use contact adhesive, something like No Nails. But I wanted to get this dry. I was supposed to be going to PeachCon at the weekend from Peachy Tips. But health things, we just had a health issue that I couldn't go. But this was going to be my diorama for that. So I was kind of on a bit of a deadline to try and get it there. But that's why I was rushing. That's why I used Mod Podge. But it didn't end up sticking particularly well. So I'd be interested to see why that didn't work. Maybe I just didn't give it long enough to dry. Maybe I rushed it through. But I used the hot wire cutter and some sandpaper just to finish off the edge to give it a nice round edge. Used another hot wire cutter. This is the first time I've used this tool. Absolutely loved it. It's really good. Really useful for getting there. I wanted an overhang on the bank to kind of give it the impression of where the river had wore it away. So I started off with the hot wire cutter and then used a craft knife just to sculpt it out. And this is where the diorama itself started to say, You don't need a second layer. That's too tall. So I'm not sure whether that... Because like this was 24 hours after I'd applied the Mod Podge and it still hadn't set in between the 2 layers. So I don't know what went wrong there, but actually I think it worked out quite well. I mixed up some terrain paste with casting plaster, brown paint and water. Again, I should have put Mod Podge in here to make it a little bit stronger. When it was set, it was still a little bit weak, but there's that much scenic sealant kind of goes on it afterwards. It doesn't really matter for a diorama. But yeah, I should have put Mod Podge into that mix as well. Use the airbrush to apply some base brown layers, which actually I didn't need to do, I realised later, because I kind of cover everything up with the basing mixes, which are from Geek Gaming Scenics. So I used a mixture of loads of different ones: the Arid Earth, the Pine Forest Ground, Desert Sand and Stone, the Mars Earth, the Grimdark, and the Shredded Leaves. Well, the Shredded Leaves are my own, I just got some dry leaves and shredded them. And just layered that up across the whole diorama in various different places where I thought it worked, where I thought it would look good. Mainly the Arid Earth and the riverbed. The Desert Sand and Stone I used to kind of create the trail going in and out. And then sealed the whole lot down with my homemade scenic sealant, which is a mix of Mod Podge, water, matte varnish and some isopropyl alcohol. I used to spray the isopropyl alcohol on and then put the sealant on, and I realised that if I put the isopropyl alcohol into the scenic sealant, I don't need to do that step, and it just works just as well. It wicks down. Once that was dry, I applied some static grass to the top. I wanted this to have really bright cartoony colours to go along with the cartoony colours of the fish and the goblin. I didn't want it to be hyper realistic, I just wanted it to be colourful and bright. Annoyingly, the green of the goblin is quite similar to the green of the grass, which I think if I did the whole thing again, I might try and paint the goblin a different colour. Maybe a yellow goblin would be cool. I don't know if that would be too much. But it works well. I'm pleased with it. I made some wooden posts, wooden signs out of some very thin balsa wood and some balsa wood sticks, and glued those together. Put some polystyrene rods into the bottom so that I could attach them to the diorama once they were finished, and painted them brown and gave them a dry brush with a lighter brown, just to try and pick out some of the edges, give them a weathered look, and then use some white paint just to paint on some messages. This is always a fun thing. I bought some acrylic pens, some acrylic paint pens to do exactly this kind of job, and then I've tidied my studio and I've no idea where I've put them, so I had to use white paint with a brush. It worked out well. I was happy with it, but it is annoying when you can't find the thing that you need. So I checked that they fit into the diorama nicely, which they did. And then I went over various parts of all of the minis with gloss varnish. I wanted to give them a wet, shiny effect. So the whole of the big cartoony blue fish is painted with the gloss varnish, because that would be wet, it's just come out of the water. And then on the goblin, it's things like the eyes, the fish that is caught, the frog that is used as bait, just little bits like that, just to give it a little bit of a different texture. For the resin pour, I wanted to try something slightly different. Instead of having to mess around with perspex sheets and things like that, or picture frame glass or plastic, whatever, I just thought, right, I'm just going to use some masking tape. So I applied some masking tape. I think I did 3 layers of masking tape, just one on top of the other, just to try and give it a bit more strength. And then once I got that on, I went round the lip, as I always do, with UV resin. And that just gives a nice seal between the masking tape and the actual diorama. Otherwise, you get leaks, and I didn't want any leaks because it's a nightmare. Mix together the resin, it's 1-to-1, and I didn't realise it's actually quick set resin. I didn't realise that when I bought it, and I was quite surprised it started to set in about 40 minutes. Added some alcohol inks to try and get a colour that I liked. In the end, I ended up adding a little bit more brown and a little bit more green as well, which is a slight difference in colour there. Poured that in, and then didn't like the colour, so added a little bit more alcohol ink, just to try and bring it back to a bit more of a cartoony, again, that vibrant style cartoony colour. Mix that in. I wouldn't recommend doing it this way. I would try and get the colour better in the cup first if I were you. Used a lighter to pop all the bubbles, set fire to the masking tape, which I managed to not get on camera, and then stuck some leaves into the water. Once it was set, 24 hours later, peeled it off, used some gloss Mod Podge to create some ripples in the water, some nice little waves. This works really well, it's a nice technique. And once that was done, painted the sides with black 3.0 and called it done.